I gave this talk at LibertyCon in 2022, and people liked it. And with LibertyCon 2023 coming up, I thought I would record it. So here goes. Let's talk about how to become a writer in 4 easy steps. Forget the nonsense. Get on with it. So we're going to talk about 4 things. First, turn off your inner critic. Second, write. Third, make it a real book. And fourth, advertise. So first thing is, turn off your inner critic. Your inner critic will paralyze you. Write what you want. Don't worry about whether other people will like it or not. You can't predict that. Write what you like. Don't try to aim it at a particular audience. You can't predict that either. And don't try to be fancy or literary. Nobody reads that stuff, other than English professors and their poor beleaguered students. Just tell the story. Tell a good story. So why turn off your inner critic? This is the hardest thing for new writers. They go back, they read what they wrote, they read again. Oh, I don't think this is doing it. And they go back. I know a guy, written the first chapter of his first novel 30 times. He could have written 30 chapters. He'd be done by now. So the first thing is just turn off your inner critic. Forget about that. I mean, when you tell a joke, you don't say, so there's this guy, he walks into a bar. Oh, no, wait. I could have done that better. So there's this guy, he's walking down the street, walks into, well, wait a minute. No, I really should say something about the guy. Don't do that. Just tell the story. You need to write the great American novel, especially just starting out. Don't try. You're not a good judge of your own writing. Nobody is. One of the problems is when you write stuff, let's say you write a book and you put it out there and people like it and you get a bunch of good reviews and you sell a couple hundred books in the first month, and you're sitting there and you're thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do if these people figure out I'm not really a writer, that I'm an imposter, that I don't really feel like I'm a writer, these reviews are so nice, I'm not that good. This is called imposter syndrome. Happens to everybody when they move into a new area. So just forget about it. You're not a good judge of your own writing. Let other people tell you whether they liked it or not. And some will, and some won't. The thing about the inner critic is, it's not time spent writing. Any time not spent writing is time wasted. It'll just make you crazy with no good end. It'll poison your writing. Just turn it off. Just stop. But I want to write something that becomes a classic, like The Three Musketeers or The Count of Monte Cristo. Okay. Alexander Dumas wrote hundreds of novels, dozens of plays, numerous nonfiction books, short stories, and articles. His total literary output is over 100,000 printed pages. He wrote 270 novels, I think the number is. 270 novels. But there's The Three Musketeers, The Count of Monte Cristo, The Sicilian. Name a fourth one. I dare you. The way to write a classic is don't worry about it. Write a lot. Maybe you get lucky. He got lucky twice. Number 2 of the 4 steps to becoming a professional writer. To be a writer, you have to write. Writing is filling up pages with composition. Some other authors, Larry Correa and those guys, have a term for it, butt in chair, hands on keyboard. That is what writing is about. It's pushing keys, having characters appear on the screen, putting words in a manuscript. Critique group is not writing. Outlining is not writing. Backstory of your characters is not writing. World building is not writing. Reading books about writing is not writing. Writing seminars is not writing. It takes a certain amount of writing, banging words into a manuscript to learn the craft. There's no substitute. Anytime you spend doing something else delays your progress. Usually the first 100,000 words you write are going to be garbage. It just takes that long to learn the craft. Just like Liberace, I've heard recordings of Liberace playing the Moonlight Sonata. It's unbelievable. But that's not how he played the first time he sat down at the piano. You're not going to do that writing your first novel. So just sit down and write it. And when you tell a story you know, or a story you can see unfold as you go. Read this book. Dean Wesley Smith wrote this book. I could not write before reading this book. There's all these steps. The creative writing instructors say you have to do this, and you should do that, and you should do this other thing, and you should outline, and you should decide how all this, and plan your story arc, and and do all this stuff. In this book, he tells you how to write without doing any of that. It was very liberating because he told me, no, you can write the way you think you should. Now, this is not going to work for everybody. Nothing works for everybody. But if you can learn how to write this way, you're going to have a ton of fun. And you're going to write a lot of books in a hurry compared to other people. So you ought to read this book and take it to heart and give it a shot. Because if you can write this way, it's great. Now, creative writing instructors. I'm going to put something in here. Some people are going to take me to task for it. Creative writing instructors are useless. Why do I say that? So there was a university in New Hampshire or something was advertising on the TV that they had a creative writing department. They were going to give bachelor's degrees in creative writing. They had 8 faculty members. They were going to teach you creative writing. So I went to their website and I looked up their 8 faculty members and I put them into Amazon, and guess what? None of them has published it. Well, I take it back. One guy published 1 novel. He's working on a second novel. And one of the other faculty members is working on his first novel. And these people are going to teach you how to write. Yeah. If you're going to take driver's ed classes, wouldn't you want to take them from somebody who's driven a car? Just saying. And if you were going to go out and, say, take up skydiving, and so you're going to go out and take a class in skydiving, I don't know about you, but I'd rather have a guy from 101st Airborne than from a guy who's never been up in an airplane, right? So when you have creative writing instructor and they say, oh, I teach you creative writing. I have 30 years experience in creative writing, teaching creative writing. Okay, well, what have you ever published? Nothing. They have nothing to tell you. Listen to real authors who've published real books. Stuff like what I'm doing right here. Stuff like what they do on Larry Correa's The Writer Dojo page on Facebook. Other authors giving seminars online, things like that. Listen to other authors tell you how to be an author because they've been there, done that. Okay, let's move on. One of the things you can do to get experience and to get your chops in, your first 100,000 words, is to write short fiction first. In the time it takes you to write a novel, you could write, instead of a 100,000 word novel, you could write 25,000 word short stories. The nice thing about that is, in a short story, you can't go wandering off. You don't end up world building an entire empire. You don't end up talking about how the main character had this event that happened in kindergarten that affected the way he approached 3rd grade, which affected no, you don't have time for that. And so it forces you to focus on the story arc. Now, in a novel, you should focus on the story arc too. It's a much bigger story arc, and it's much easier to go astray. In a short story, you just don't have the space. And so writing short stories gets you to focus. You can also focus on something you feel you need practice on. Like if you think you're no good at dialogue, you could write a short story that's all dialogue. Or scene setting. You could write a short story that's got a lot of scene setting in it, or a lot of emotion, or a lot of action. And so that allows you to get more words of practice in the areas where you think you need it. It also gets you completing projects, and you get that sense of closure. Finished. And then you read it back and you go, hey, this is okay. This is pretty good. Okay? And so you get extra, hey, I finished it. And for a novel, that's a couple of months off, even if you work every day. So I published an anthology, Adamant and Other Stories, in 2016. First published work. 11 short stories. Each was a writing exercise. I think I'm pretty good at dialogue and action. One story has none of either. Can I still engage the reader? Can I get the reader emotionally involved with the characters with no story? or excuse me, with no dialogue and no action. It has to have a story. But can I get the reader involved? I normally write in third person, so I wrote a story in first person. I normally write serious fiction. Yeah, it's science fiction, space opera kind of stuff, but it wasn't comedy, so a couple of stories in that book are comedy. And science fiction is usually handsome people doing heroic things. You've got the big blonde-haired, blue-eyed, muscled space guy, and he's got the busty girl. And so I wrote one story about a bald, overweight, sociopathic, early teen female with plumbing connections at her throat, her abdomen, and her groin, surgically implanted, electrical contacts on her fingertips, and a green alien parasite that lives on her head and feeds off of hollow fangs inserted into her carotid arteries. Could I make the reader engage with her? Could I make her the hero? Could I get the reader to cheer for her? So I use those as writing exercises. So you write your first novel, and your first novel sucks. Of course it does. All first novels suck. You have all these things in your head you want to put in your novel. You've been collecting these ideas for years. They don't all fit into a single novel, but, that's okay. Write them all out of your head so you clean out the attic and make some space to work in. Heinlein did this in his first novel, For Us the Living. There's all kinds of Heinlein's sort of, philosophies and all of that sort of stuff. It's the whole thing, one after the other, through the whole book. Now, all of those things appeared in other books, but not all of them at once. So he did that. I have a trunk novel, so when you finish it, when it's done, don't polish it. Set it aside. Now you have a trunk novel. That's fine. Maybe your family can, after you're famous and you made a lot of money and everything being a writer, your family can publish it posthumously after you die. Now, your second novel has a chance. But what you need to do is avoid the, I already wrote a novel and it sucks, I can't do this. It took me 10 years to realize that that was the wrong idea. Don't waste 10 years on it. Of course it sucked. All first novels suck. But it gave you experience putting words on the blank page. And if you look at the first chapter of your first novel, and you read that, and you read the last chapter, you'll see how much you've improved. So, in the second novel, concentrate on the story. Put in only those parts that fit, leave out what doesn't. You can put those in another book. But now that you've gotten all that stuff written out of your head, you can pick and choose what goes in the novel, and just put in what belongs. And that's got a much better shot. Now, use characters you know. Don't invent the perfect character. Unless you're writing about Winston Churchill, don't invent the perfect character. Don't invent the person who's always witty, always has the right line, is very strong, always has the correct skill set, always, and just, sails through the plot. Also, don't invent a terribly flawed character. The guy who's just overwhelmed with angst, and he's neurotic, and he's just continuously worried, and who wants to suffer through that? I mean, some of them get good reviews, but really. And the thing about those is they're normally written in close third person or internal third person, which means you get to suffer through all that stuff with them. No, thank you. Don't worry about politically correct cross-intersectional characters. Just write about the sort of people you've actually met and actually known. You can say, well, I've had Black friends, I've had Japanese friends, I have Chinese friends, I've got Hispanic friends, I've got friends who were gay, I've got friends who are bisexual. It's like, okay, fine. Use all those people in your book. But don't do it to check off a checkbox. Write it because they fit in the story. Because what would be really good here, and put that person in the story. There are all sorts of really interesting, real people out there. Use them. Oh, and if one of them's been mean to you, you can put him in a position where he gets killed in a really messy and painful way later in the book. Now, plan your river crossings. So what do I mean by river crossings? Before there was a highway system, in the early 20s, when people drove cross-country, there were no highways numbers. there were no Route 6 or Route 66, no I-80 or I-55. When you drove cross country, you figured out where you were going to cross the rivers, and then you drove cross country on farm roads to get there. And you just sort of winged it. Oh, let's see, we got to go about 5 miles north and about 20 miles west. So this north-south looks pretty good. Let's go up this one a few miles and look for a good east-west to get some of that 20 miles going west. But you're aiming at getting to that town because there's a bridge there, and you can get over the river. So you can do that with a book, too. You can pick like a half a dozen things in the story of the book that are points you know you have to hit, and then just write cross-country, if you will, to get there. Now, how would that work? So if you think of Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring is actually called Book 1 and Book 2, the first half of the Fellowship of the Ring and the second half of the Fellowship of the Ring. And Book 1 of the Fellowship of the Ring, you could put it in 5 river crossings. Frodo gets the ring and he and Sam leave. They meet up with Merry and Pippin. They meet Aragorn and Bree. They fight the Nazgûl and Weathertop, and then they finally get to Rivendell. So you could have those as the mileposts in your head, and then just sit there and write it freelance until you get to that river crossing, and then write to the next one, write to the next one, and just make it up as you go. Another thing is, all this world building and character development and all of the advanced stuff people tell you to do, you're going to end up doing that stuff. But do it as you write. World build as you go. It's called indirect exposition. So let's say the main characters are going to go, they're at the university, and they're going to go to the far end of downtown, the east end of downtown. So they go maybe down an escalator to a subway. They get on a subway train, they take it to the eastern downtown exit, and they get off and they go the escalator up to street level. Okay, so they get on where? University Station. That's it, University Station. And they get off at East Downtown, and it's the 5th stop. And, okay, you don't have to, in the first chapter, describe the subway system and put a map in the book and then label all the stops, the first stop, second stop. No, you just wait until... Okay, I have to get my main characters to East Downtown. How am I going to do that? Oh, they could take a subway. Okay, so it's going to be the 5th stop, say. Now, what you have to do is, you can make that up as you go, but you need to remember it later because it's 5 stops back also. So you don't want to be inconsistent, but you can just make it up as you go. And you can draw the map as you fill the thing in, as you fill in what's going on in the city and what's, where the university is and where the downtown is and where the shuttle port is. You can fill all that in and draw a map as you go and keep that on your desk and refer to it later. But don't build it up all ahead of time. The other thing, same thing with characters. If you develop your characters as you go, you can play some interesting games. I had one where I needed one character to trust another, and they didn't know each other, but they met for this meeting, and I needed one to trust the other. And I hadn't described either of their backgrounds. Well, what happened is the one character heard a little bit of an accent in the other character's voice. Now, they'd both taken on sort of standard accents, the imperial accent. But they both, the one recognized in the other's voice a little bit of an accent and realized he was from the same planet as she was. And so they talked about being from the same planet. And now the trust is there. And so I couldn't have done that if I'd have defined these characters all ahead of time. I had their home planets and I had all this stuff listed, and because I would have had to go back and change everything if I had that idea. But since I hadn't discussed any of that, I could just insert it in there in the flow as I was writing. And that kind of stuff is cool. So the problem with doing all the advanced stuff and doing all that before you start is when you start your book, that's what's on the top of your brain. And you're going to fall into the exposition trap, writing pages and pages, telling the reader all the cool stuff you thought up for your new universe. Boring. If you do it as you write, you'll think of cool things you can include which aren't in any advanced plan. You couldn't have thought that stuff up ahead of time. And if you do it as you go, you'll put it off until you need it, which is when the reader's going to need it. So it works out really well. and have fun. Enjoy the story as you write it. Enjoy learning the story as you go. Sort of like reading a book, except you're typing. So don't agonize over it. Don't let the inner critic in the door. Just have fun. Tell the story. Have fun telling the story. The reader will have fun with you. If you're not having fun, do you think you're going to be able to put words on the page that encapsulate a sense of fun, gives the reader some fun, has the reader enjoying the story as you go along? If you're sitting there agonizing over it, no. So the other thing is, if you're not having fun, you're not going to put in the hundreds of hours it takes to write a book. It takes me 30 to 40 days to write an 80,000 word novel. And that's a nice size. I like that size. You know, people now really write 100, 120, 150, 160 word novels. I think there's a sag in the middle for those for most of them for me. So I write 80,000 words. Really nice number for me. 30 to 40 days. Usually 2,500 words a day. So, but I work at it 12 hours a day. 12 hours a day for 40 days is 500 hours. That's about 160 words an hour. It takes hundreds of hours to write a book. I write 7 days a week when I'm in mid-book, so I don't forget from Friday to Monday and have to start over or reread everything. So you better have fun. What if your second novel sucks too? You wrote the first novel sucks. Rich Wyan told you that was okay, so you're okay. Second novel, boy, I'm going to nail it this time. And you do the second novel, and it also sucks. Well, that happens. Write another one. Sooner or later, you'll get enough words under your belt that you know what you're doing, you know what works, you know what doesn't work, and you'll be able to write a novel that you can be happy with and publish. So if your second novel sucks, write another one. Well, then there's the other thing, though. What if your second novel's great? Write another one. The advice is the same either way. Number 3, in 4 steps to be a professional writer. Make it a real book. First, try to get the technical details right. If you're going to do orbital mechanics, you better learn some orbital mechanics so you get it right. If you're going to have somebody discussing gravitation, you better learn something about gravitation. If you're not going to learn that stuff, then don't go into details. If you're going to have technical details in the book, you got to get it right. It's same thing with guns. If you're going to have guns in them, you better get it right. So, when I did the first colony book, Quant, there was a lot of orbital mechanics in there. Now, I got my master's degree in physics, but that was 50 years ago. And so I need some refresher. So I went to look through my Facebook friends, and it's like, oh, which of the half a dozen people that worked at NASA do I want to have tell me about orbital mechanics? And so I got in touch with one, and she said, sure. And she walked me through, and I remembered as we were talking about it. It's like, oh, yeah, okay, I got it. But you need to get the details right. Look it up, ask somebody, watch a documentary, get it right. Second thing, have it professionally edited. Very few people can write clean copy that doesn't need editing. You're probably not one of them. So get a professional editor. There are people out there who will do it for not that much money, $200-$300 for a book, and they'll go through and they'll find all the mistakes. They'll restructure your sentences so that they come out right. They'll tell you about plot holes and things like that. Third thing, format it properly. Make it look like a traditionally published book. So somebody picks up and goes, oh, look, this is nice. This is like the one I got last week from Daw or Tor or something. You want a frontispiece? That's the blank sheet in front of the title page. Sometimes it says other books by so-and-so, on the front. Then you have a title page. On the back of that, there's a copyright page. There's a table of contents. There's gutters, which is the extra paper on one side of the sheet. So when they bind it together and you open the book, the text is centered in the part you can see, even though some of the paper goes into the center. It's got page numbers. It's got page headers, all that good stuff. Get it set up right. Next item, do not use Times New Roman font. self-published books, and I can tell you it's self-published in 2 seconds. I open the book. If it's in Times New Roman, it's self-published. 95% of self-published books are in Times New Roman. No traditionally published book is in Times New Roman. Times New Roman is a font that was made for newspapers. All the characters are squished sideways. So an O isn't a circle. It's like a football standing on its point. That's to get more characters on a line in a newspaper. That's what it's for. Using Times New Roman in a book is just wrong. So I like Palatino linotype. As soon as you go to something other than Times New Roman, you separate yourself from 95% of self-published books. Get an ISBN from Bowker and do the paperback version too. The paperback version on the product page, it's not going to be a huge portion of your sales, but it's going to make you look real. And it's nice to have paperback books because you can take them to conventions and autograph them and stuff. Because if you write on somebody's, like somebody's iPad screen or something, they get mad. So autograph the paperbacks. Get a nice cover done that will attract buyers and drive sales. That doesn't mean doing your own artwork or doing your kids' artwork. Go out and hire an artist to do it. Yes, it can be thousands of dollars for a cover, but it doesn't have to be. It can be a couple of $100 for a cover. I'm sort of in between. I do this $450 a cover. And I have an outfit in Europe do it, and they do a really nice job for me, and I'm really happy with them. So that's not bad. And finally, write a good blurb for the Amazon product page. But don't write the blurb where you tell them what happens. Fred is doing this, and he's on this trip, and then they get attacked, and he gets taken prisoner, but he escapes, and then he gets the bad guy. And if you tell me all that, why do I have to read the book? No, Fred's taking this trip, and he gets captured. Now what is he going to do? That's your blurb. Not telling people how it comes out. Nothing past the first or second chapter should be in the blurb. To review, do you really have to research the technical details and make sure you get them right so that, the gun works in the proper way, or, the gravity works the proper way? Yes, you have to do that. Should I have it professionally edited? Yes. Do I have to do all that formatting stuff and everything? Yes. Do I have to use a font other than Times New Roman? Yes, you do. Should I do a paperback version with an ISBN number and all that? Of course. Do I need professional cover artwork? Yes, because the cover is what's going to draw people to your book when they see the little thumbnail on Amazon. Do I need a good blurb page on Amazon? Yes. And there are people on the net who will help you with all this. If you just told somebody, I have this scene where this guy uses a gun and I'm not sure about it, can somebody read it and tell me if I got this right? And people go, sure. And there's all kinds of groups for writers that will help you with that kind of stuff. Number 4, advertise. You have to let people know your book exists or they can't buy it. Now, some ads are free. There's some good Facebook groups that allow ads. John Ringo Fan Club allows ads on the first and third Fridays of every month. Monster Hunter International fan page, which is Larry Correa's fan page, allows you to put a comment that's an ad on their writer promo post. So every once in a while, every month or so, they put a writer promo post up there, and then you can put a comment on there that's your little ad. Space Opera has a monthly open market thread. That's the same thing. It's an open market thread post, and then you can put a comment under that's your little ad, and everybody puts comments in there. In the science fiction group, you can post ads anytime. Now, you don't want to overdo it or they'll tell you to cut it out, but I do, every couple of weeks, I'll post an ad in the science fiction group. There's 78,000 people there, and they're all pre-selected for science fiction. The hardcore sci-fi group, No Effing Star Wars. Yes, that's the name of the group. You can also post ads anytime. Same caveat, every couple of weeks. Hardcore books, science fiction and horror group. You can also post ads anytime. You can post an ad there every week because that's a book group. That's what they do. And you can also go ask your friends to post your book on their timeline. So you post a thing on your timeline on Facebook, and then you post a little comment that says, hey, my friends, could you please post this on your timeline? I really need the exposure. Now, Amazon Marketing Services are the people that do paid ads. And these are when you look at somebody else's book and they've got the picture of the book and it tells about it and it's got their blurb and the author and the publisher on it. You get to a thing where there's a bunch of little ads across and it says other products you might be interested in. And it says sponsored. That means they're paid for. And you can scroll across those and swipe those across and see if there's some other book you want. Now, I spend about 30% of my royalties on ads. And people go, 30% of royalties? My gosh. It's like, yeah, but before I ran ads, I didn't sell anything. And 70% of a big number is a lot more than 100% of nothing. So, yes, I spend 30% of royalties on ads. The first 3 words of the ad blurb is the hook. When somebody's scrolling across those ads, they don't read the little paragraph under every cover. Their eye is going across the page as they scroll these. Their eye is going left to right. So you want something on the first line of that ad blurb that's going to catch their attention. And I found out, for instance, with Childers, if I started out, Space Navy action, they stop and read the rest of the blurb, and they might click on the ad. So that works. If I don't put Space Navy action at the beginning of the ad, and they say, well, Jan Childers was this poor child who grew up in it, I don't get any clicks. For targeting, use author names in your genre. So let's say you're doing colonization science fiction. You can look up colonization science fiction on Amazon, and it'll show you the top 100 books. So you just take all those author names, and you copy and paste them, so you make sure you get them right, and you get rid of the duplicates, and then you make those the targets for your ad, their names. Those won't mistarget. And so, and they'll be aimed right at the big sellers in your marketplace. Mistarget is when you pick a target that thinks makes sense to you, but it hooks into some completely other thing, right? So if you were a garden tool supplier, for instance, and you had an ad target that was hose, you might end up hooking into every documentary about rap music, for instance. So you got to be careful. How do you troubleshoot AMS ads? If you get no impressions, you're not winning the bid. Your bid is too small. If you get impressions but no clicks, either the cover image, remember you have to have a professional cover, right? You got to hire an artist, right? Your cover image or your ad blurb, the part that with Children says, well, Space Navy action, they aren't working because they're not getting the click. But if you get clicks and you get no sales, now the product page blurb isn't working. Remember on the product page blurb, I told you, don't tell them the story. Tell them the main character situation when the story starts. And so if your product page blurb isn't working, you'll get clicks, you just won't sell anything. So I have had books for sale on Amazon since December of 2015, the far left of the graph. And the upper graph is unit sales of both print and ebook. And the bottom one is the pages in Kindle Unlimited. Can you tell when I started advertising? Yeah. May of 2018. Pretty obvious, isn't it? What's the cost of advertising? Well, like I said, I do about 30%. These are numbers as of mid last year. The number now would be more like $63,000. But I had spent at that time $52,000 on ads. I got 58 million impressions and 82,500 clicks. What royalties resulted from that? The upper right corner, $174,000 in royalties. That was as of last year. I just crossed $200,000 in royalties over 5 years. So notice that the Kindle ENP, the equivalent numbered pages or equivalent standardized pages, whatever, normalized pages, is 109,000. That's bigger than the ebook royalty from downloads and bigger, much bigger than the paperback royalty. That's Kindle Unlimited. Kindle Unlimited is good for an independent, especially somebody who doesn't have a name yet, because people will give you a try because it doesn't cost them anything. They don't have to pop $4, $5, $6 for a download, a Kindle download, and be out that money just to read the first 10 pages and decide you suck. They can go into Kindle Unlimited, and which is a club they pay monthly dues to belong to, and they can read for free once they pay the club. You get part of the club dues. That's how you get paid. But they can just take your book and read the first 10 pages and decide you suck without having to spend anything. So they give you a shot. And if instead in the first 10 pages they go, oh, this is pretty good, and you hook them, well, then they're going to read the whole book and you get paid. So most of my income comes from Kindle Unlimited. But again, I spent $52,292 on ads, and I reaped $173,864 in royalties as of last year. So call it $180,000, ad spend of $52,000, percent of royalties that goes to ads 29%. I aim between 30 and 33, and my net royalties is $128,000. What else works for getting the word out? Genre-targeted conventions work. For a new author, smaller is better. If you go to a big convention, there's going to be a million big names there, and everybody's going to go chasing off after them, and you're not going to get any attention. If you go to a smaller convention, you'll be a bigger shot in a smaller pond, and but you'll get more attention, I think. You can give your books to the local library. Now, the interesting thing about that is it gets it into the library database that all the libraries use to see what other people are doing and to trade books back and forth. So if you give your books to your local library, a lot of them have a local authors kind of shelf, it'll get in the U.S. library database. And tchotchkes, giveaways, pens with your name on them, business cards, bookmarks, I don't know, just about anything. Box of Altoids, got your names on them, put a sticker on there. Anything that when they get home, they go, who was that guy again? I can't remember his name. The guy was in that one panel. And, they're in the box of stuff he brought back from the convention. There's your piece of tchotchke with your name on it. He goes, that's the guy's name. That's it. I'll go look him up now. One last thing, the importance of the backlist. If you're a traditionally published author, they publish your book, and it's out there for a couple of years, and it goes out of print, and so if you're an independent author, you can put your books out there and keep them out there forever. They're print on demand, basically. Amazon prints them when they need more, but you can have your books out there for a long time. All of my books are still available. So if we look at this from last year, there's 10 selected books, in the thing, and the top one is Hecate with the baby blue stripe. If you take a look at the graph at the top, that's less than half of the revenues coming in, the royalties coming in for that period. You go, and this is the month of May last year. So you go, that's less than half. Well, what's all those others? There's, on some of those you can count 10 stripes. Above the baby blue, there's 10 different colors. That's all my other books. So the backlist, if you will, the things that might be out of print at a normal publisher, the backlist is more than half of my royalties. So having a deep backlist and keeping those available, very important to revenues. So that's it today. Turn off your inner critic. Stop critiquing yourself. Just write a nice story. Don't try to figure out in advance if it's going to work or not and for who. And just don't. Just write a story that you like. You have to write. Butt in chair, hands on keyboard, putting characters on the screen. That's writing. Make it a real book. Format it to be indistinguishable from a kind of book that somebody buy in a bookstore from a traditional publisher. Indistinguishable. All the same stuff. The headers, the frontispiece, the content, table of contents, everything. And finally, you have to advertise somewhere, somehow. Amazon ads works for me. So do Facebook groups that allow it. And then you can get the word out there. People know who you are. People start trying your books. once they try your books, you can get people hooked. And then every time you come out of a book, boom, they're on it. And that's it. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I was able to help out with your budding writing career. And good luck. We'll see you at the cons. Bye-bye.